One shot. That's all it took to tear a hole through history. In an instant, the voice of defiance was silenced. Kirk, the man who gave hope to the powerless, the man who dared to challenge inevitability, was struck down before the eyes of his people. But his death was only the beginning. Because what followed was darker than the bullet itself. The lies, the cover-ups, the attempt to erase him from memory. And yet, the truth burned too brightly to be smothered. This is not just the story of an assassination. It is the story of how a fallen man became immortal. There are moments that burn themselves into history. A single second, a single shot, and the world is never the same. The assassination of Kirk was one of those moments. A leader silenced. A people shaken. And a truth twisted by those who feared him most. This is the story of the day Kirk fell. The lies they told, the truths they could not bury. And the legacy that rose from his blood. Act 1, The Shot. It was the 14th day of the third cycle. The city of Halion glowed beneath banners of freedom. Crowds filled the plaza, their voices lifted not in fear, but in hope. At the center stood Kirk. Not in armor, not behind walls, but among his people, as he always had. His voice carried across the square. We are not bound by chains of destiny. We are not pawns in their games. We are more. And then, the crack. A sound like thunder tearing the sky. One moment, words soared. The next, silence. Kirk fell, crimson spreading across his coat. Guards rushed, screams erupted, children wept. The assassin vanished into the chaos. A shadow, a ghost, swallowed by panic. And as Kirk's body was lifted from the stone, every heart knew. The world had just changed. Act 2, The Lies. But grief was not the first voice to follow. Lies were. Within hours, the broadcasts filled the air. A cold voice spoke for the Concorde, repeating the script written by trembling hands. Kirk was reckless. Kirk was dangerous. Kirk's death was necessary for stability. They called him an agitator. A man who sowed division. They claimed he courted chaos, that his vision was a threat to peace. And worse, they sought to erase his name. To turn the voice of defiance into a villain in the very hearts that loved him. But truth is not so fragile. The people remembered. They remembered Kirk walking the streets without guards, eating at their tables, lifting their children high upon his shoulders. They remembered the man who brought enemies together, who gave bread to the hungry, who told the powerless, "You are not alone." Whispers rose in defiance of the lies. If he was reckless, why did he bring us hope? If he was dangerous, why did he stand with no weapon in his hand? If he was a traitor, why did they fear his voice more than his armies? The more they lied, the louder the truth became. Act 3, The Condolences. As the lies cracked, the world turned its eyes to Halion. From across nations and even across stars, condolences poured in. Allies wept openly, declaring Kirk a brother. Rivals bowed their heads in respect, admitting they had lost more than an opponent. Flags fell to half-mast. Markets fell silent. The bells of 100 cities told his name. And the people, ordinary workers, children, soldiers, mothers. They lit candles on every street corner. They sang his words in defiance of silence. They painted his image on walls, on banners, on their very skin. Even in places where it was forbidden to speak his name. The whispers carried. Kirk lives. The powerful had hoped his death would end the unrest. Instead, it spread his fire farther than his voice ever could. Act 4, The Legacy. Kirk's assassin believed a bullet could end a man and his dream. The powerful believed lies could bury the truth. Both were wrong. For Kirk's death did not silence him. It multiplied him. Movements rose in his name. Children in schools repeated his words as vows. Leaders sworn in draped their hands upon his image and promised to carry his vision forward. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, A phrase spread like wildfire. We will not kneel. Not to fate. Not to fear. Not to the lies of the powerful. Kirk had fallen. But in falling, he became more than a man. He became a symbol. A reminder that defiance lives on not in one voice, but in millions. And so, the bullet that struck Kirk did not end the story. It began a new chapter. The man was mortal. The lies were temporary. But the truth? The truth was eternal. Kirk is gone. But his defiance lives in us. And his legacy will never kneel. Act 5, The Scapegoat. The Concorde wasted no time in presenting a face to the crime. A young man, a college student, barely more than a boy, was paraded before the cameras. They said he acted alone. They said his motives were simple. Anger. Madness. A misguided soul who despised Kirk's vision. The story was neat. Too neat. A lone gunman, captured within hours, already confessing. It tied the threads. It calmed the streets. But beneath the surface, it didn't add up. Witnesses swore the shot came from the rooftops, not the plaza. The boy's weapon didn't match the wound. And his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a killer. They were the eyes of someone terrified, someone who knew he was being used. Had he fired a weapon at all? Or was he just the mask they needed? Act 6, Who stood to gain? In every assassination, there is one question louder than the shot itself: who benefits? Kirk was not just a leader, he was a disruption. He threatened the power of the Concorde, who thrived on obedience. He threatened the wealth of the syndicates, whose fortunes were built on chains. And he threatened the silence of the hidden councils, whose lies could not survive in the light of his truth. To them, Kirk was more dangerous alive than dead. For alive, he rallied hope. Dead, they thought they could control the narrative. But they miscalculated. The people did not believe their neat stories. The fire spread. And suddenly, the question of who pulled the trigger mattered less than who gave the order. Some whispered it was the Concorde Senate. Others pointed to the syndicate lords. A few even dared to say it was someone within Kirk's own guard. The truth was buried beneath layers of lies. But one thing became clear. Kirk's assassin was not just a college boy. He was a scapegoat. The bullet may have come from his gun. But the order came from the highest towers of power. Act 7, The Unfinished Trial. Kirk's assassination remains an open wound. The trial of the boy ended quickly, too quickly. Records sealed. Testimonies vanished. Witnesses disappeared. But the people remember. And memory is a weapon they cannot erase. Every year on the day of his death, thousands gather in the plaza where he fell. Not just to honor the man, but to demand the truth. They know the bullet killed Kirk. But it was fear that ordered it. Fear of his vision. Fear of his words. Fear of what humanity might become if it refused to kneel. And so, his true killers walk free in shadows. But their victory was hollow. For in trying to bury Kirk, they buried themselves in doubt, in suspicion, in the endless weight of a question they cannot silence. Who really killed Kirk? And until that answer is revealed, his story is not finished. We mourn not only the man who has fallen, but the future that was stolen with him. Kirk could have been a leader for generations. A voice to guide us through storms. A light to remind us of who we could become. And now, that light has been taken too soon. It is not just his family who grieves tonight. It is every soul who believed in him. Every child who might have grown beneath the shelter of his vision. Every heart that dared to hope because he taught them how. We have not only lost Kirk. We have lost the future he might have built. And in that truth lies the heaviest grief of all.